Thanks. It's fun to be the one to get started. So as Mario said, I enjoy sort of being question-driven, and if this is an audience of people that are here for to hear something, I'll try and make a few introductory statements about myself and Second Life, and then I want you guys to give me some stuff to talk about. In terms of me, and in general about starting companies, I think there are a lot of different types of entrepreneurs. I talk about that a lot when I see them. The word itself I don't think means very much. That is to say, the reasons behind why an individual goes through the process of trying to start something and follows through on it come from a lot of different, fairly different reasons. I think for myself, it is because I am at heart an inventor. Since I was a kid, I like to build things, and I've never stopped liking to build things. And so for me, the entrepreneurial process is just a means to an end. It's, you know, in a capitalist marketplace, you have got to come up with a way to get some money to build anything that you're imagining. And if the thing you're imagining is, something, you know, you can't do with $100 at Home Depot, well, you have to get investors or backers or whatever. And so that's very much what it was for me. When I was in the 4th grade, to give you an idea, I may look like I'm good on stage and I'm getting better and better with eye contact. When I was in 4th grade, I brought into school an analog computer that I had built myself. Analog computers are much easier to build than digital computers, but nevertheless, like, I was that into electronics and gadgets and things. And so I was forever tinkering and cutting things up and wiring things together. And lucky enough to be born right at the kind of, you know, I guess I'm like one generation younger than like Bill Gates. So for me, computers were commonplace, although not really affordable when I was young. But I was young enough, and I was so crazy into electronics and computers that by the time I was able to get my hands on a computer that was a reasonable computer, it was like 5th or 6th grade. So I had plenty of time programming them before I became the young man who was in college and thinking about what he was going to do and was he going to get a job or be an entrepreneur. And for me, that moment, the moment that that was so well timed, as with everybody else in my age and generation, was the birth of the internet itself. And that was the thing that, you know, I was ready. I had programmed computers for a long time. Let's see, I started my first company when I was 17, so I was definitely very, like I say, I like to build things, and I was also very practical about, you know, who would buy this and could I get some money, and that would be so cool. My first job, my first company when I was a teenager was I started programming database systems and networking PC computers together in those days before the internet, and in fact before Ethernet. We had other ways, you know, coaxial cables that you connected computers together with. And I installed multiple PC computers in car dealerships and wrote the software to help car dealerships sell cars better by printing all the forms and stuff. So I was this very hands-on entrepreneur. I had a little pager when I was in high school, and I thought I was so cool because my pager would go off and it would be one of my customers. You know, it was a car dealership, and I had to call them back. Although I had a lifelong illness, you know, my stomach always still hurts, like if I feel the vibration of the phone, because I was so busy. You know, I was in high school trying to figure out where I was going to go to college, and the damn pager would go off, and I'd just be like, oh, you know, it's another car dealership that somebody's trying to sell some $10,000 car, and this thing won't print the forms. So that was my first business. When I grew up and went to college, graduated college, I moved right here, literally a few blocks away in San Francisco, to 3rd and Townsend, right at the 350 Townsend, that building right there. And it was literally the epicenter of all the really interesting stuff that was happening on the internet at the time. And of course, it was the birth of the kind of commercial version of the internet, was right in those years. This was 1994. And so I was blown away by that. But in relation to starting things in Second Life, since the time I had known about networks and computers, I had always put the two ideas together in my head from the time I was in college, really. I just could not stop thinking about how the coolest thing that you could ever possibly do as an inventor and with computers would be to connect a great big lattice or grid or something of computers together using the internet, and what you would do with that bunch of computers is simulate reality. That you would somehow regenerate the laws of physics. I studied physics in college, so I was, you know, kind of really meditating on that stuff. Regenerate the laws of physics, create an entirely new world in which the atoms were replaced by some kind of Lego blocks. And there was money so that people could build their own businesses in there and do things. And you could just make stuff, from buildings to yourself, your clothing, your appearance. And that idea, in terms of, you know, the seed of an entrepreneur, all I can say about Second Life is I just couldn't stop thinking about that idea. And in fact, I just couldn't get it out of my head. I just kept coming back to it all the time. And I always say it's like having a baby. They say that when you're going to have a baby, what you want to do is wait until every morning, even when it's like Saturday and you're hungover, and you look up and you wake up and you look at each other and you're like, all we want to do right now is have a baby. You know, I want to be woken up in the morning by this kid. Until you actually have that feeling, you don't want to do it. And I think that about companies, it's the same thing. It seems more likely that a company will succeed in those magical times when you just don't have any alternatives. Like, you don't feel that you have an alternative to starting the company. So many times I hear the stories about entrepreneurs who sort of, you know, I arbitrage, you know, I spotted this opportunity in the market. And I think that's another great way to be an entrepreneur, but it's definitely not my way. Mine was this kind of, I just couldn't get away from the idea. So in fact, I sold my first company to Real Networks. Sorry, when I came up here and discovered the internet, I started working on video compression. And the reason I started working on video compression was because I told all my friends, I want to build this crazy virtual world thing, Lego blocks, and it's going to be so big and crazy, and who knows what people will do. But I can't do it because we've got modems and really crappy computers back then. You know, we didn't have that. We didn't have that stuff. So I literally told all my friends, I'm going to start this amazing thing. I didn't know it was called Second Life. We didn't think of that name at that time. But I'm going to go off and work on other stuff in between. And when the time is right, you know, I will get the call, and you know, I'll go work on this thing. So that was actually how it happened for me. And I sold my first little company to Real Networks. Then I was at Real Networks as one of the executives there as it grew and went public, which gave me some of the money to fund Second Life at the beginning. You can ask me questions about, you know, that and strategy on that. And at some point, two things happened in 1999. Actually, not at some point. In about the summer of 1999, I was at Real, and two things significantly changed. One was we became absolutely sure that broadband was going to go the distance. It was going to be the way that everybody was going to connect to the internet. Believe it or not, there was a time, 1999, when that really wasn't obvious to everybody. The second thing was that NVIDIA released the graphics coprocessor chip, which was this amazing chip that could render, you know, 3 million little triangles on the screen per second. And I looked at those two things and I said, oh my God, I can go do the crazy Second Life thing, virtual world. Left Real Networks, told Rob, the CEO, you know what I'm going to tell you? He's like, you got to go do that thing with the virtual reality. And I said, I got to go. Came back to San Francisco, started the company in Hayes Valley here in San Francisco. And after raising we raised about $6 million to get to the point where it was viable, the thing was up and running. That was kind of the point where we knew it was going to work, and there had been tremendous stress and risk and worry prior to that. And then as a company, in terms of relevant stuff for people here, I think we raised about 20 total before we hit profitability. 20, which is of course like 10 times more money than you'll ever raise these days, for good reason, because it's so much faster and easier to build things today than it was even 10 years ago when I was working on Second Life. So that's kind of the story of me and of Second Life. So actually, seriously, who has a direction or a question or a thought, and I'll kind of riff on that.